Good morning, and thank you for attending today's Worksite Wellness Lunch and Learn. I'm Carol Battle, and I manage our statewide wellness program. I hope everyone has had a wonderful holiday and that you are all off to a healthy start to 2024. Please note that we do offer closed captioning for this event. If you're interested, just click on the link in the question and answer to use this option. We are so excited about our wellness topics for the 2024 series, and we think that you will be too. Email invitations will go out as they have in the past. And of course, you will be able to keep an eye on our Worksite Wellness webpage where we will post past and future topics. Today, we are pleased to share with you important information about the invisible gas called radon. You will learn how you can take charge of your household's exposure, as well as the impact climate change is having on lung cancer risk through exposure to radon. This is a cutting-edge project, and this morning we will be greeted by our very own Department of Health and Human Services employee, Phillip Gibson. Phillip has just received an award from the Duke Cancer Institute relative to community outreach, engagement, and equity for his leadership in the radon testing and mitigation efforts across the state, with a particular focus on underrepresented minority populations. Phillip's passion for environmental justice is inspiring locally as well as across the nation. Following his comments, we're excited to welcome a special speaker from the Duke Cancer Institute, Dr. Tomi Akinyemiju. We are thrilled to hear directly from her as she shares insight on the impact climate change is having on lung cancer due to radon exposure. During the presentation, you can use the chat box for any questions, and we will answer those as they come in. I'd also like to thank the members of the NC Flex team who are here to help with questions. We'll save a few minutes at the end of the event to conquer any questions that we aren't able to get to during the demo. For now, let's welcome Phillip. Phillip?
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me go ahead and upload my slides here so we can begin. So again, I'm Phillip Gibson. I work for the North Carolina Radiation Protection Section within the Department of Health and Human Services. And I will be giving you essentially an update on free test kits, as well as a baseline or a foundation of information that will lead into Dr. Akinyemiju's presentation. I want to note that if you would like to get a free test kit and you're a North Carolina resident, you can do so by going to our website and ordering there. If you are from another state, then know that most states and tribal communities across the nation are providing free test kits as well. I'm not aware of where they are within their distributions, but you'll want to check in with your radon professional there. So, the thing that we state all the time is that you cannot smell, taste, or see radon. However, we can see radon, which is basically the release of energy as uranium decays. And we can do so by the use of a device called cloud chamber. This cloud chamber is here on this slide. And I'm sorry, I don't know if there's any way Kara or others could mute the population. That would be helpful. Thank you.
I'll check on that.
So the device that you're getting to see is a cloud chamber that, through the cooling of the air within this box, allows us to see the release of energy from this natural decay process. This room that we'll see radon particles in has already been tested and found to have a level of 100 picocuries per liter. So what you'll see inside of this box is, in fact, roughly 100 picocuries per liter that's been trapped inside of this box. So the flat white lines are, in fact, radon alpha particles being released. And so this is really what's happening around us at all times at some level. And I thought it would be best for you to kind of see radon at a level that we can to make this a little bit more real. So radon is the leading environmental cause of lung cancer in the United States. It's second only to tobacco smoking. And an estimated 21,000 people die each year in the United States from radon-induced lung cancer. Again, it's a radioactive particle. We're inhaling it. It's causing damage to the cells inside of our lungs. And if that damage does not heal properly, it can result in cancer. There are things that influence our risk for cancer. The first is the radon level, and that's what you'll be measuring with your test kit, or if you hire someone to come and measure the radon level. So each level, every level, has some risk associated with it. We certainly make strong recommendations that if your level is 4 picocuries per liter or more, that we strongly recommend that you consider mitigation to lower that level. But we also say, and EPA says, and the Center for Disease Control Prevention says, that if your level is from 2 to 4, to still consider mitigation, because mitigation can lower the levels below 2 picocuries per liter. The second thing that influences our risk for radon-induced lung cancer is the length of time that you're exposed to that average level. Again, you're testing for about a 3 to 7 day period. We regard that as an average level that we assume you're being exposed to over a year, every year, for some period, 10 years, 20 years, et cetera. So your length of time that you're exposed to that average radon level influences your risk. If you are an ever smoker or a never smoker, those also influence your risk. An ever smoker, someone who has smoked 100 cigarettes or more ever in their life, actually, you are now 10 times more susceptible to radon-induced lung cancer than someone who is a never smoker. Children have also a higher susceptibility to radon. They are regarded as twice as more susceptible to a level than an adult. And of course, if a child is also exposed to secondhand smoke, they also have an increase because of that smoking variable, and could be up to 20 times as susceptible to radon than an adult who has never smoked. So what is radon? I've already mentioned that it's a radioactive particle. It is regarded as an alpha particle. And really the importance here is just to say that alpha particles are not strong enough to go through our skin. So they can't go through paper in this diagram. So therefore, they're not going through our skin. The way they enter into our bodies is by either inhaling it and thus causing impact to our lungs, or ingesting it. And we do have situations in North Carolina where radon levels are high within private well water. This is not a concern for municipal water, but for private well water, if high levels are found, then that can come in contact with the lining in your stomach and cause other cancer issues. Those are listed on our website. So it's an alpha particle, cannot see it, smell it, cannot taste it. It's a naturally occurring gas, and it comes from the decay of uranium. And this is just a simplified decay chain, just to say, you know, we start off with uranium that's found in rock and soil naturally. It's decaying, it turns into other elements like radium, which eventually go into radon, and eventually at the end of its life in this decay chain, we're seeing lead. The things that influence the concentrations within our buildings are the sources. So of course, I've already mentioned that radon is naturally found in rock and soil, but it can also be found in building materials, things like sandstone, brick, concrete, gypsum. And so there are high-rise and mid-rise condominium buildings or other large buildings, commercial buildings that have the potential for elevated radon level. The pathways for that which is coming from the ground, it could come through the openings like the cracks in the foundation or the natural joints between the wall and the floor, or through private well water. And then, of course, air pressure There is this heat stack event, heat rises. We've heard that. There are things that influence the negative pressure within a building. And so that influences how much radon is in our buildings. When we look at this, it's just a simple diagrams here to say that a home with a basement or without a basement, home with that's a slab on grade, a crawl space, even a manufactured home that may have skirting or some kind of underpinning on it, those all have the potential to draw gases inward. And then, of course, large buildings built with the materials that I mentioned earlier have the potential for elevated radon levels as well. Again, the cracks in the solid floors, the construction joints, these are all pathways. The air pressure is influenced by things like changes in humidity, changes in temperature, but also we have winds that push against buildings, influencing the negative pressure, making them become, they being the buildings, more like a vacuum drawing gases inward. So when we start thinking about climate change in this next presentation, think about how climate change is going to impact or is impacting stack event, winds against the buildings, the influencing the vacuum effect, the drawing within of gases from outside. So for testing guidance, just for those who are testing their homes right now, there's a lot more information and videos on our website for how to test and utilizing the test kit that we're giving away for free. But overall, just know that we're recommending that you test for no less than 48 hours. We need to use no less than 48 hours worth of data to make a decision for mitigation. And of course, if you have any questions, certainly contact me and I will guide you through the process.
Phillip, we did have one question as to how often you should be checking your home.
Yeah, so we recommend, there is those who already have mitigation systems in their homes and those who may not. If you don't have a mitigation system, we recommend you test every 2 years. If you have a mitigation system, then certainly test every 5 years. These are the levels and the actions to take for those levels. So of course, if you test and your level is under 2 picocuries per liter, then test every 2 to 5 years, as I just mentioned. If your level is between 2 and 3.9 or 4, then consider mitigation. And of course, 4 or more, we highly recommend or strongly recommend that you consider mitigation. 77 of the 100 counties in North Carolina have had indoor air levels that exceed 4 picocuries per liter. So we know this to be a statewide issue. And certainly when you see high levels on the coastal area, I would suspect, we don't have home addresses, but I suspect that these are from tests taken within, say, high-rise buildings or large buildings with building materials as the source. We also have a lot of information around groundwater and the potential for radionuclides, which are uranium, radon, radium, gross alpha, gross beta. Those are things that are being tested in some areas, particularly in Wake County. Wake County has had a very strong educational program and have been empowering their residents for a number of years now. So applaud them, but recognize also that there are other geological formations. And we have new maps, guidance maps on our websites that are county specific. So if you wanted to know what the recommendation is for your county, please go to our website for that. And here is an example of that county specific information. So of course, this is just Alexander County, just to give you an example of each county's, what it looks like. And in the top right, we'll give you the recommendation, either indoor air testing and or testing for private well water. I want you to know that our efforts with Duke Cancer Institute really are trying to address an issue that we've known for a few years now, and that is, people of color have shown to be less apt to know about radon, and therefore are not testing for it in the frequency that people who are white are doing so. So questions that we've added to statewide surveys have reflected this. So as you can see, there's been no change over a 4-year period from 2015 to 2019. There's not been an increase at all in the knowledge of radon. Certainly within Black and Brown communities, we've seen some increase and some increase within the white community, but our effort is to try to equalize this, to create equity in understanding the issue. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Tomi Akinyemiju, who has been leading this research effort with Duke Cancer Institute. She will certainly recognize the other entities within Duke that have been involved in this research because it is a multifaceted, multidisciplinary effort. It is cutting edge. And with that, I'd like to now ask her to begin her slides.
Thanks so much, Philip. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I will share my screen. And thanks again for the invitation to present. It's great to be here today and I have this conversation about definitely a very important topic. So I'm a professor of population health sciences, OBGYN and global health, and also serve as Associate Director for Community Outreach Engagement and Equity at the Duke Cancer Institute. So, lung cancer is one of the top cancer causes of cancer deaths in the US. And in North Carolina, incidence, so the number of new lung cancer cases and deaths due to lung cancer actually exceeds the national average. So lung cancer prevention in North Carolina is really a topic of top priority for the state's health department, for Duke Cancer Institute and other partners across the state. We know that there are also geographic and kind of race ethnic differences in incidence and mortality due to lung cancer. We know that African American, Hispanic, and individuals with low socioeconomic background tend to have higher lung cancer mortality rates. So this is really a health equity issue as well. We know that cigarette smoking is the primary risk factor for lung cancer, as Philip already mentioned, but a substantial amount of lung cancer cases actually occur in people that are non-smokers, about 15 to 25%. And we actually see that over the past few decades, that lung cancer among non-smokers have actually doubled. So this is an area of growing concern to better understand the drivers of lung cancer in people that have no prior smoking history. As Philip also mentioned, radon exposure is the second leading cause of lung cancer. Radon increases risk of lung cancer, whether or not people are smokers. But among people that have radon exposure and are also smokers, ever smoker or current smokers, the risk increases by orders of magnitude. So we're definitely concerned about radon as a driver of lung cancer and radon exposure among people that have smoking history. And as was mentioned already, there's a substantial amount of lung cancer deaths that are actually attributable to radon exposure. Given that we know that radon is a risk factor, we know that there are testing and mitigation strategies that work. This is really an area that is ripe for interventions, whether at the individual, household, or the statewide policy level. This is actually something that we can intervene on to be able to reduce this number. Philip has provided a lot of details about what radon is, so I'm not going to spend so much time on it, but it is classified by the World Health Organization as a Class A carcinogen. It is a known cause of cancer. It is naturally produced and migrates from the soil into the atmosphere and from the atmosphere into the indoor environment, leading to that exposure of in the respiratory tract after inhalation. We are learning more about the health effects of climate change across various domains. But in the case of radon exposure, we are becoming more aware of the potential risk associated with changing climate patterns, things like extreme precipitation that can increase the release of radon from the soil into the atmosphere, extreme temperature that can also increase the release of radon, increased exposure in indoor environments, and then behavioral patterns to adapt to climate change. So whether we're planting more trees or we are spending more time indoors, those are also strategies that may help us adapt to climate change, but may also actually increase our risk of radon. So it's really important for us to understand as the climate continues to change, temperature continues to swing in the extremes. We tend to have more precipitation events. We tend to have more wind events. It's really important to understand what the health-related implications of those changes might be, specifically how it might relate to radon and how that might impact future risk of lung cancer. We're also really interested in the experience of underserved communities in North Carolina. As mentioned before, lung cancer has really well-described disparities where, the highest burden of lung cancer mortality is among underserved communities, low socioeconomic status communities, among Black and Hispanic and Native American communities. Given what we know about the effect of climate change, that it may also be more severe in those communities, it is really critical as our goal to advance health equity and reduce the disparity in lung cancer mortality to understand how these changes might be happening. So Phillip approached us about a year or so ago, and over the course of several months of conversations, we started to collaborate and come up with this study, which we call the CLOVER study, meaning the climate impact on lung cancer risk via exposure to radon. So this is a partnership between the Duke Cancer Institute, Duke School of Medicine, Duke University, and the Climate and Health Initiative, and DHHS through the radon program. The CLOVER study has two main goals. One is we would like to characterize radon exposure patterns across North Carolina. Again, paying attention to different geographic patterns, social determinants of health, really paying attention to minority, underserved communities to understand what the exposure testing patterns are in North Carolina. And then also to estimate what the relative impact of changing climate patterns would be on the radon exposure in North Carolina, and again on prospective lung cancer risk. This is data that Phillip already presented, showing that in 2019, level of awareness about radon was pretty low, and was especially among minority populations. We saw that only 14%, 14% of Hispanic, 37% of Black adults in North Carolina had any awareness of radon, compared with 65% of white adults. We saw that only about 29% of adults living in households with income less than $25,000 had any awareness of radon. We saw that renters, only about 31% of people that rent their homes had any awareness of radon. These disparity patterns mirror exactly what we see in lung cancer incidence, stage, and mortality, where people who are Black, Hispanic, low income, and from low socioeconomic status tend to have, increased risk of lung cancer, late stage diagnosis, lack of access to screening, and they tend to be to have higher mortality rates. So really, this is an area of high importance. One of the first things we started to work on in our collaboration is evaluate, what is known, what do we know currently about radon testing in North Carolina. Thanks to Phillip, we got access to radon tests from the two largest radon testing companies in North Carolina. They provided us access to their data between 2010 and 2020. So these tests are, residential radon tests, 3 to 7 days on average testing period. So we collected this data, combined the information from the two testing companies, and then linked all of that information with neighborhood level characteristics. We were interested in, again, understanding what the testing rates were among different communities based on percent Black, educational status, and socioeconomic status. So across all of North Carolina counties, looking at this results from this analysis, we found that communities that had younger residents, more Black residents, more residents with less than a high school education, more and lower socioeconomic status residents were less likely to have had radon tests done during the 10-year period that we examined. So that's the first column here in the table 1. By various measures of social determinants of health, we see that those minority underserved communities tend to have significantly lower testing rates. When we focused only on counties that have been considered high risk for radon exposure, we see the same patterns, that even in those high-risk counties, that communities that are minoritized have less lower testing rates for radon. So definitely supporting the concerns and supporting the data about awareness, that not only do those communities have lower awareness about radon, there's also lower testing rates. And when we looked at it across the geographic region, we see here that the red and yellow colors on the map on the top left are showing where there are more testing happening. So we see that there's higher rates of residential radon testing in the western mountainous regions in North Carolina compared to the eastern coastal plains. And given what Phillip showed, that about 77% of counties in North Carolina have had high radon levels detected, I think this is definitely a geographic disparity that we need to address. And then when we look at the panel of graphs on the right, the one on the top left, the panel A, is showing the correlation between neighborhood disadvantage, which is another measure of socioeconomic status. We see that as neighborhood disadvantage increases, radon testing rates decreases. That's why those dots are kind of trending towards the bottom. We see the inverse when we look at neighborhood affluence. So these are neighborhoods that have more higher income households. We see that as neighborhood affluence increases, radon testing rates increase. The panel C is showing ethnic immigrant concentration. We also see suggestion that as neighborhoods increase the amount of ethnic immigrants that are residing in those neighborhoods, they also tend to have lower testing rates. So again, supporting that we need to pay attention to both geographic, racial, and socioeconomic disparities in radon testing, and really enhance our efforts to increase testing rates in those communities. And then, thinking about potential impact of climate change on radon exposure, we still relied on the residential radon testing data that we received from the 2 large testing companies. We expanded the size of the testing data, and then we linked the radon testing data, which is at the household level, with environmental data on several different indicators. So we were looking at data about temperature, average temperature, wind speed, precipitation, elevation, vegetation index, soil moisture. So these are all environmental variables that give us a lot of really robust information about what's going on in the physical environment. So all of these environmental data are what we call high dimensional, meaning you can have temperature measured like every minute of every day over months and years. Same with wind speed and precipitation. So there's a lot of variables that really need to be accounted for to do this analysis. So a lot of our traditional analytical methods actually cannot handle data at this level. So we have to do a lot of data cleaning and kind of more robust analysis here. But basically, we again started with the data sets we received from AirCheck and Alpha Energies, which is the household residential radon tests. We cleaned the data, we removed duplicates, we got rid of extreme values. We again, just made sure that the data was as clean as possible. We linked all of those residential testing data with the environmental data that we were able to obtain at the census tract level. And then we did several types of analysis to account for these correlations. We made a distinction between radon testing that was done for the first time and subsequent tests, because usually when households find high radon level, the recommendation is to do an additional test to make sure that after mitigation, to make sure that the mitigation actually worked, which might also skew the data if we're combining first test results and post mitigation results. So Doing a lot of data cleaning just allowed us to better understand the data sets that we had prior to doing our analysis. So we ended up with over 100,000 unique tests that we used here over the 10-year period in North Carolina. You can see the distribution of the test by the test company here. The vast majority was by AirCheck. AirCheck also had a lot of repeat testing done. We did a lot of kind of robust data cleaning and ended up with slightly smaller number of unique tests. We exclude any tests that were done outside of the state of North Carolina. We needed to link each household with the environmental data based on the longitude and latitude of the household. So if we were not able to geocode that particular household, we excluded them because we would have been missing all of the environmental data. So we ended up with about 24,000 tests from Alpha Energy and about 68,000 tests for AirCheck. Then we looked at the average radon concentration across the different test companies. So these values here for radon concentration are showing the median and the minimum and maximum values here. So you see that the median radon concentration levels were 2.4 and 1.9 on average, which is well below the 4 picocuries per liter threshold. However, if you look at the range, we have significantly a very significant range of values here. So which again just shows that there's just a range of exposures in different households across the state. We can also see that the majority of the tests were conducted in the basement, as Phillip mentioned. A lot of the exposure happens from exposure and release of radon through the ground floor. So which is why a lot of the tests are actually located in the basement or the first floor of buildings. So corresponding with that, we see that the majority of the tests were done in those two locations. And then, considering all the various environmental data that we had available, this table 2 here is showing the spatial regression analysis, meaning we're considering the environmental data, the geocoded data, and the estimate here, if it's negative, it's an inverse association. If it's positive, it's a positive association. And we're seeing that some of the environmental data that were most significantly associated with radon values were distance to the fault line, where the higher the distance to the fault line where the household is located, the lower the radon exposure level in that household. The higher the elevation, the higher the radon exposure level that's observed. Higher vegetation index was also associated with higher radon levels. Conversely, wind speed, median wind speed, and median temperature were inversely associated with radon exposure. We need to account for some additional variables, some random effects is what we call them. There are aspects of the environment that change a lot, which include like the vegetation might change, the wind speed, the temperature. And then there are other aspects that may not change that are fixed. And also again, accounting for the fact that we have multiple measures for some of these variables over time. So we were able to take advantage of some more sophisticated kind of machine learning modeling to account for the additional complexity in the data. So table 3 is showing 3 additional different types of model that accounts for increasingly more complex specifications of our data. And we see again that elevation was associated with increased risk of radon. We saw that the distance was still inversely associated. We saw that the higher the soil moisture value, the higher the radon exposure level as well. Other factors that were also significant were the month that the test was done, the type of bedrock material that's available, the floor of the building where the test was done, and the soil type. So this is just beginning to give us, a sense of how kind of environmental conditions that may be vulnerable to climate changing patterns, right? Like the vegetation, the wind speed, soil moisture, and humidity, how some of those variables might directly impact radon exposure. We saw that, as I mentioned, the geological factors, the soil type, the rock type, those are all variables that affect how much of the radon gas is being released from the soil into the atmosphere. Things like vegetation index might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but if we think about it, the more trees that are available, the more likely that the soil may be porous, and so there's increased release of radon from the soil into the atmosphere. Radon can also be absorbed by trees via water, meaning that once the trees kind of transpirate or release air, that includes more radon gas. So as we think about climate change adaptation, planting trees might be one of the strategies that we think to keep the environment cool. Ironically, that might also lead to increased radon exposure through the release from the soil. We think about things like wind speed as well, where the higher you go in terms of elevation, the higher the wind speed, and how that might also increase release into households, creating that negative pressure that Phillip talked about earlier. So we're still in the beginning stages of this analysis. We're still trying to, deal with this really complex, high-dimensional, kind of continuous environmental data and figure out, what is the best specification for the model to get at which of these variables might be most important in predicting radon exposure, and what kind of associations would be observed. So those are all existing data. Those are secondary data that we were able to analyze from the from the residential testing companies, linked with existing data from like the Environmental Protection Agency and other agencies that track environmental exposure data. There are many aspects of our research question that we're not able to address by using secondary data. It doesn't get at individual behavior. It doesn't get at kind of household patterns, like, do people use air conditioning? Do they leave the windows open? Do they keep the heat on in the winter, or use AC in the summer? Do they spend more time indoors when it's hot, or things like that? And just all of those individual risk factors, including smoking, which, as we mentioned earlier, is a really significant effect modifier of this exposure, where people who are exposed to radon are also smokers, or even have exposure to secondhand smoking at significantly increased risk of lung cancer. So to get at some of those individual additional factors that we do not have access to, we designed a primary study to evaluate a lot more of those variables, including several climate mitigation and adaptation strategies, and then to get additional real-time radon exposure data with particular emphasis on underserved communities. So we've designed a study to be a stratified random sampling method, meaning we intentionally oversample households that have a higher proportion of Hispanic and non-Hispanic Black individuals. We intentionally sample households that are renters versus owners, and then we made sure that we had a reasonable distribution of the various geographic regions. So we purchased a North Carolina-wide commercial household data set, and have a database of about 10,000 households from which we selected, from which our goal is to recruit 1,000 households for this study. Our recruitment approach focuses on a combination, just to make sure that we are able to meet folks at where it's most convenient. So we're going to use a combination of email, direct phone calls, and postcard to recruit individuals. Our study postcard is what is shown on the right side here. We hope it's a very colorful and very North Carolina focused graphic here, and hopefully we'll encourage folks to sign up to participate in our study. So we, for the households that we are reaching out to recruit, again, this is targeted recruitment, so it's not open to any household, because it's stratified random sample, we pre-specify which households we would like to recruit to make sure we hit the minimum number of households we need for each of those categories that I mentioned. So we send first an introductory packet to each of those households. That includes a pre-stamped postcard, which they can mail back to us to let us know that they're interested in participating. We have an introductory recruitment letter that provides a background about the study and the rationale for why we're doing this. And then we include some informational documents. Even if folks are not interested in participating, we think this is a good opportunity to increase awareness about lung cancer and radon exposure in the households. For people who are interested in participating, they can either mail back the postcard and give us a time to call them. They can ask us to mail them a copy of the survey. But our preferred option is for people to go online. There's an individual link, a unique link on each postcard where folks can go online and be able to complete the consent form and complete the survey. Our survey is administered over RedCap, and for folks that prefer to not do it online, we can call them and administer the survey over the phone. And as I mentioned, we can also mail a paper copy. The survey covers multiple domains that are relevant for our research, including demographics, age, gender, race, ethnicity, income. We ask a lot of information about the household and household characteristics, like how many kids, how many individuals in the households are elderly, what floor of the house do they live in, do they use AC, how do they keep their house cool, variables like that. We ask about their level of awareness about radon, prior testing and mitigation history. We ask questions about climate change awareness, adaptation, what are some of those behavioral things that they have put into place to adapt to climate change. And then we have a lot of questions about social determinants of health that will be relevant as well. Once folks complete the survey, we mail them a radon test kit. Thanks to Phillip and the team for providing us with those kits. And the test kits, once they put it in their house, we have detailed step-by-step instructions to guide individuals on how to use the kit. They mail the kit back to the lab, and then the lab sends the results back to the household. They also send the results back to us so that we can combine that with the survey data to be able to do our analysis. Folks that complete and here's our flyer for the study, again, that provides just high-level information about what the study is about, eligibility criteria, what to expect in doing the study, and then an FAQ that has additional information. The QR code is on the bottom to take folks directly to the website to complete the survey. We have our email address and a phone number that folks can call us as well if they would like to. Individuals that complete the survey receive a $10 gift card, and then an additional $10 gift card for completing the radon test and sending that back in to the company. And here's what the packet looks like. It's again provided by Phillip's team, and the results go directly from the company to the study participants, and we also get a copy to use for our analysis. Once the results are released, if the radon level is below the threshold, we send them a thank you card for participating. We send them their gift card. And then on the right side here, it's showing the results, meaning that the radon level in the household is below the threshold, is within a safe range, so there's no need for additional mitigation. We give them information about the NCDHHS radon program if they need additional assistance. And then on the left is the information for if their results are above the threshold. We provide information on how to, to learn more about radon mitigation strategies through NCDHHS as well. So we started recruitment, just before the holidays. So things are just now beginning to pick up a little bit. We've sent out over almost 6,000 electronic invitations by email, and we've mailed out 150 initial packets. So I think so far we're now at about 80 individuals that have logged online and completed the first part of the survey, and about almost 60 individuals that have completed the actual study survey. We are now in the process of mailing out test kits to the first 60 or so people that have done the survey. And we are tracking the race ethnic distribution of participants. So far, it's about 56% non-Hispanic white, about 40% non-Hispanic Black, about 4% Hispanic. So we are paying attention to this number. Our goal is to really meet the target distribution by race and whether folks are renters or owners, and by geography. So this is something we're paying attention to. And for the next steps, we will continue to do our analysis using, various machine learning and statistical techniques to model different scenarios, looking at climate change patterns on radon exposure. Subsequently, we will integrate data on lung cancer incidence for the state of North Carolina, and be able to estimate how various scenarios of climate change and radon exposures might impact long-term lung cancer risk in North Carolina. Secondly, we are continuing active dissemination for our primary recruitment. We're doing a lot of outreach in the different communities to really increase our survey completion rates, especially in those underserved communities. That's where our priority is, to really be able to get those results and get those surveys completed. We are paying a lot of attention to efforts to make sure that everyone receives their test kits, they send that in, and they receive their results back, and that we connect folks to get the appropriate mitigation resources. We are actively seeking additional grant funding to be able to expand this work further than what we have right now, and to be able to support policy efforts across the state. Our work with Phillip continues, and we're really excited to continue that partnership to be able to generate some of this evidence-based data that can inform various entities, including the state legislature, to support things like adding radon testing and mitigation standards to building codes, requiring property owners of rental properties to test for radon. And these are all consistent with ongoing efforts with the governor's environmental justice and equity initiative. So we really hope that the data generated through this work will be very informative. And we're continuing to do a lot of partnership building and education with various community organizations to do more to educate the public about not only the importance of radon, but potential climate change health impacts and how this might be related to radon and lung cancer risk. So finally, as Phillip mentioned, this is a big effort, really a multidisciplinary collaboration. We have investigators from the Duke Nicholas School of the Environment. We have Dr. Jeffrey Clark, who is a thoracic oncologist. He treats lung cancer patients. Dr. Koch, who is in the School of Nursing. Dr. Yang is the postdoctoral associate that led most of the analysis that presented. And then Phillip, of course, and other members of the team that were involved in the operations. And just finally want to acknowledge the funding support from the Duke Climate Commitments, and of course support from the NHS with the test kits and with all of Phillip's effort. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tomi. I'm now going to answer a few questions that have been posed in the chat box. First and foremost, I want everybody to know that if you're attempting to get a free test kit through our website, it's my understanding is that the first round of test kits have been exhausted. A second round of free test kits will be made available beginning January the 15th. So the link that is currently going to AirCheck, who is our vendor for distributing test kits, mailing those directly to you, has now a page that says that you have to buy one at $12.95. So you're certainly welcome to purchase one if you'd like, but if you want a free test kit, know that that will become available on January the 15th through our website, so there it is. Catherine Pruitt from the American Lung Association. So Catherine is an awesome leader within North Carolina. She asked the questions, what are the plans for providing support for mitigation? Does mitigation resources include financial assistance? So thanks, Catherine, for that comment, because I want people to know that if you are working with or you are a person who meets a financial criteria with the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, they actually have funds, grant funds for people at a certain income level that will pay outright, pay for your radon mitigation system. And if you are interested in that, excuse me, certainly give me a call or send me an email. My phone number is 828-712-0972. That's 828-712-0972. Or you can just go to the Radon Program website. That link has been on the page quite often. So let me know if you need that. So those were all the questions that we've had thus far. Are there any other questions that folks would like to ask?
Yeah, I see a few. So let me see. There's one from Zan Jones about if the instructions are sent in Spanish. I'm assuming that's, oh, you responded, Philip. I just saw that. Yes.
Yeah, no worries. So
Okay.
yes, we do have directions in Spanish. Those are on our website, both the PDF and then there's also a video. And then we attempt to make everything, our entire website can actually be translated into a number of languages. So in the top right-hand corner, if you know of folks who need the information in another language outside of English or Spanish, you can actually convert our entire website into that language. Our free test kits offered periodically throughout the year are just these 2 rounds. They are just during January, which is National Radon Action Month. So we, as in the North Carolina Radon Program, which is the same for every state and tribal community, we request funds from the Environmental Protection Agency. We receive those funds, and whatever those funds allow for us to purchase, we do so, and then we make those available through our website. So once they're exhausted, they're gone. How do you find a reputable mitigation company? So go to our website. We are not able to state, as a state agency, not able to give you a name of a company, but we certainly know who are certified to do radon mitigation in North Carolina. So go to our website under radon mitigation, and you'll see the 2 certifying organizations. If you need more help, certainly give me a call.
Thank you so much, Phillip and Tomi. We really appreciate you all participating today. This was so informative. And I have really looked through the website, and your webpage is so informative. So everyone who is in attendance today will receive a copy of the presentation as well as the links. And if you have any particular questions, of course, Phillip has given his contact information multiple times. And if you have any specific questions, feel free to email him directly. Next, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, there are a couple of questions I can answer that just popped up. Okay. So one of those is on well water. And yes, I did not spend a whole lot of time because it takes a lot of time to get into these issues. But if you have questions about radon testing in well water, feel free to give me a call. But on our website, we actually have a page dedicated to testing private well water for radon and other radionuclides, like testing for uranium or gross alpha, gross beta. And you'll see that we're utilizing Wake County's videos and such because they were so spot on and helpful. There's another question, which is moving into a townhome community. Last night I found my home has radon, which I should have had installed. Should HOAs be required to? I can answer that. So the answer is, to my knowledge, it is really a negotiated item between you and your HOA, or between you and the seller if you're a buyer, and you could contact them. But most often what I hear is that individuals who own their own home are hiring certified professional to install a system, and then they're working to meet any kind of aesthetic requirement that the HOA may have, because it will cause a white pipe to be on the outside of your home. So some HOAs have concerns over that. So in terms of why to retest every 2 years, so, when you test your radon level today, you are getting the level for that specific period of time that you've tested. And so that means that uranium in the ground, we'll just choose the ground, has been releasing radon at some level at that moment in time. But because we're relying upon the decay of uranium, it could decay faster, it could decay slower, or it could stay the same. And the only way to know if that's changed is by testing. So there we go. Thank you, Ms. Battle.
Okay, great. Well, we are very fortunate to have both of you here today, so we really appreciate your time. And this has been so informative. You can see that we've had lots of good comments from our participants. Our next wellness webinar, Lunch and Learn, will be on healthy aging, secrets to longevity from the Blue Zone research. So we would welcome all of you to sign up for that January 23rd, and it will be equally as interesting. This growing old is a full-time job, I'm finding out. So lots of bits and pieces. Thank you all for coming today, and you will receive an email from our group within the next day or two. Thank you. Thanks, Phillip.
Thank you.